Fellas, this year alone, we've had some massive fraud checks in the UFC. When a fighter that's got a ton of hype to their name and everyone thinks they're going to do well, they fall short against an opponent that, let's be honest, they should have beaten. So I'm going to be ranking some of the biggest fraud checks in the UFC, from S tier being this is a Hall of Fame fraud check. Absolutely, you know, one of the biggest fraud checks in the UFC. And then D tier being it wasn't really a fraud check. They kind of just lost to a guy that was better on the night. So ranking some of the better fraud checks in the UFC today. Let me know your thoughts on these placements and if you agree or disagree with any of these placements. And we'll go in there with the first fraud check, which is Shamil Gaziev losing to Rozenstruik. I'm going to put it in B tier. I don't know why Shamil Gaziev was ever given that fight in the first place. It wasn't like he went on this massive streak of wins where everyone thought he was a future champion. Let's be honest, no one thought Shamil Gaziev was future challenger worthy. He only had one win in the UFC by finish, and then he got put in there in a fight night main event in his second fight against Rozenstruik. Well, he got chucked in the deep end, essentially. So I wouldn't say it's really a fraud check because there wasn't much hype in the first place, but it was the way he lost as well. I mean, to do that to Martin Boev, he looked actually pretty good against Martin Boev. And then in his second fight against Rozenstruik, after the first round, he had no gas tank, he quit on the stool, and he showed that quite frankly, he isn't top 15 worthy. So Shamil Gaziev, I'll put him in B tier for now. There wasn't much people thinking he was the future title challenger of the heavyweight division. So yeah, Shamil Gaziev, B tier for now. Then we've got, an S tier now. Vito Petrino, straight in the S tier. The amount of parlays this guy ruined, the amount of people that bet on Vito Petrino to KO Anthony Smith, everyone was thinking this guy was going to beat Anthony Smith. He's going to go out there, sleep Anthony Smith, send Anthony Smith outside of the UFC, and we've got a new title challenger in the light heavyweight division in Vito Petrino, and that honestly wasn't the case. He goes out there and loses and gets finished in the first round to Anthony Smith, of all people, in his first test in the UFC. The guy that was, a big challenger for Alex Pereira, a big threat to the light heavyweight, title area. I even thought he would have been a difficult fight for Prime John Jones, and then he goes out there and gets finished in the first round by Anthony Smith. Wasn't a good look, to be fair. Your first real challenge and you lose it. I still think he can kind of build himself back up because he's a dangerous striker and he's inexperienced. He was against a more experienced guy, but everyone thought Anthony Smith was just a lamb going to a slaughterhouse. In reality, Vito Petrino got finished. Big upset. So for Vito Petrino, it was a big fraud check. It was a big fraud check. And I think he showed that he's not worthy for these top 15 guys right now. So for Vito Petrino, straight into S tier. And then we've got Mohammed Usman. I'm going to put Mohammed Usman in D tier. I don't think anyone was looking at Mohammed Usman as a guy that was going to be, a title challenger in the heavyweight division. No one was looking at this guy as being a big threat to the ranked heavyweights. He was kind of just popular because it was Kamaru Usman's brother. And he lost to Mick Parkin. Mick Parkin's not a bum. Mick Parkin's is a pretty solid fighter. He's well-rounded. He's actually quite quick on the feet for a fat heavyweight. He trains with Aspinall and all those guys. So Mick Parkin isn't a complete bum. And it was a decision loss as well. He didn't get finished. He didn't get battered. It was a very, very close fight. A lot of people thought Mohammed Usman should have won that fight. So for Mohammed Usman, I'm going to put him in D tier. It wasn't a fraud check because he didn't really have that much hype to his name anyway. And he lost a very, very close fight against a fairly solid heavyweight. So, yeah, Mohammed Usman, he's still going to be up on these, other unranked fat heavyweights. He's still a pretty solid fighter. I don't think that fight showcased anything less in his skill. So, Mohammed Usman, I'll put him in D tier, but I guess it showed that he's not ranked worthy just yet. And then we've got Jailton Almeida. For Jailton Almeida, I'm going to put him in C tier. Yeah, he lost to Curtis Blades, man. Like, Curtis Blades is now going to be fighting Aspinall for the belt, you know what I mean? Like, it wasn't like he lost to a complete bum. He didn't lose to Derek Lewis. And he still showed that he's still got great grappling. I still think he can build himself up in the heavyweight division because of his grappling. He's still one of the more superior grapplers, but he just fell short on the night to Curtis Blades. He had a bad technique, got out there, Curtis Blades beat him. And yeah, I mean, a lot of people did think Jailton Almeida was going to get past Curtis Blades and potentially even threaten Aspinall and Pavlovich and Garn and all those guys. But yeah, he got stopped by Curtis Blades. To be honest, there's not much I can really say. He lost to the better guy on the night. I still think he can, I think he's going to beat Romanov at UFC, was it 302 as well? But for Jailton Almeida, he did lose on the night. A lot of people thought he was going to win, in which he didn't, so I have to include him in this list. And I think it was a C tier, purely because of the fashion that he lost as well. Got finished badly in that second round. And then we've got Ruzi Boev, a guy that just fought this weekend against Buckley. Now, for Ruzi Boev, I'm going to put him in C tier as well. Again, I don't think there was much hype on Ruzi Boev. It wasn't like this guy was like Bo Nickel or Hamzat Chimaev level of hype where people thought this guy was the future of the UFC, future double champ. He was kind of just another undefeated guy that happened to be from Uzbekistan. Well, he wasn't undefeated, but you know what I mean? Undefeated in the UFC. From Uzbekistan. He had 2 good wins in the UFC, but I have to include him on this list because, let's be honest, the UFC included him on this list because they thought he was going to beat Buckley. Buckley would have fought regardless of who the opponent is on St. Louis, so they give him Ruzi Boev, hoping that Ruzi Boev was going to go out there and beat Buckley, and that just wasn't the case. Buckley beat him pretty comfortably as well. Again, I still think Ruzi Boev's a dangerous striker, but it showed that he's not ranked worthy. It was his third UFC fight as well, and he got put in there with Buckley, so he didn't get necessarily fraud checked, but he showed us that he's not ready for these top 15 guys, and there's a lot of holes in this guy's game, but I don't think there was much hype on this guy to begin with. So for Ruzi Boev, I'll put him in C tier. Wasn't a big fraud check, but he did lose to Buckley, and a lot of people thought he was going to win. There were so many people spamming the Uzbekistan flag under, you know, the face-off between him and Buckley. Well, Buckley did well to beat this guy. Then we've got Benoit St-Denis straight into A tier. Now, to give him credit, he lost to Dustin Poirier, right? It's not like he lost to a guy that was unranked or a guy between the top 10 to top 15 rankings. He lost to a guy that's been around the lightweight division for the longest time and is literally going to be fighting for a belt in his next fight in Dustin Poirier. He didn't lose a fight to a bum. He didn't lose to a guy that everyone thought he was going to... Well, actually, he did... A lot of people didn't think Benoit St-Denis was going to win. There were so many people saying that Benoit St-Denis is going to go out there and slay Dustin Poirier. And to be honest, it wasn't just the fact that he lost to Dustin Poirier. It was the fact that he lost in the fashion that he did. I know he had staph infection or whatever, but I think a lot of people are now picking him to lose against the other lightweights as well. I mean, to go from people thinking he's going to take out Dustin Poirier and fight for a belt, to now people saying that Dan Hooker's going to beat him and all these other ranked lightweights are going to beat him. I still think Benoit St-Denis is a dangerous guy, but he got fast-tracked way too quickly. To go from Matt Frivola to Dustin Poirier as well as a crazy jump, and he showed us that he's not ready for that area of the lightweight division, and it was a big fraud check. A lot of people thought Benoit St-Denis was the future of the lightweight division, and he showed that night that he isn't. So, big fraud check for Benoit St-Denis, getting finished by Dustin Poirier in the second round. I'm glad that I picked Poirier to win that fight. He's more experienced. He's been around at the top for the longer time, and Benoit St-Denis, quite frankly, showed us that he's not ready for that area. So, Benoit St-Denis straight into A tier. Then we've got Roman Kopylov. I wouldn't say this is a big fraud check, right? He fought Anthony Hernandez. So for Roman Kopylov, yeah, I'm going to put him in D tier. It wasn't really a big fraud check. Roman Kopylov's still a dangerous guy. He's still a great striker. He did show us that his grappling's not as good as we thought. Obviously, we all know him for being this dangerous striker, but he showed us that his grappling has a lot of holes in... he's got a lot of holes in his grappling game, and that he's not ready for a lot of these grapplers in the middleweight division. So if he cleans up his grappling and improves his grappling, I still think he could potentially be a threat to a lot of these top 15 guys in the middleweight division. But he lost to Anthony Hernandez as well. He didn't lose to a bum. Anthony Hernandez, I think he's going to climb the rankings in the middleweight division. He's such a good grappler, is Anthony Hernandez. He's dangerous as well, so... losing to Hernandez, getting choked out by Hernandez isn't necessarily a big problem. I think the big fraud check was that he showed us that his ground game and it needs to be improved massively, and he's a fairly beatable guy, Roman Kopylov, and if he would have gone out there against these higher ranked middleweights, he probably would have lost in a worse fashion. So Roman Kopylov, I'll put him in D tier. Wasn't really a fraud check. I still think he's dangerous, and he's pretty old in age. I just think he showed that his grappling needs to be improved massively. And then we've got Mike Malott. Mike Malott, man, this guy's going straight in S tier. The future of the welterweight division, people were calling this guy. The future of the welterweight division. The next GSP. The next big Canadian star in the UFC. And this guy not only loses, but gets finished against Neil Magny, the biggest gatekeeper in the UFC. The fight where Mike Malott should have gone out there and destroyed Neil Magny and made a statement to show the rest of these welterweights who he is. And he gets finished by Neil Magny. All those GSP comparisons, all those claims of being the next big thing from Canada, and he loses to, what's his name, Neil Magny. Yeah, this guy must have chucked so many people's parlays out the window in that fight. So for Mike Malott, there's no option but S tier. Big fraud check in the UFC. Am I saying he's completely done? No, but to lose to Neil Magny with the amount of hype this guy had around his name, it was a bad loss. So for Mike Malott, straight into S tier. The comparisons that this guy was getting, compared to, completely abysmal. Losing to Neil Magny, getting finished by Neil Magny when you're getting compared to GSP, has to be S tier for Mike Malott. So Mike Malott straight to S tier. And then we've got Joe Pyfer. For Joe Pyfer, I don't think it was a big fraud check. I'll put him in the same tier as Shamil Gaziev. I'll put him in B tier. Unlike Shamil Gaziev, he actually had a handful of fights before he got a Fight Night main event, but this guy was getting compared to Francis Ngannou. Well, this guy's got Francis Ngannou type power. He's the hardest hitter in the UFC. And quite frankly, the UFC put him in a Fight Night main event against Jack Hermansson because they thought Jack Hermansson was going to get taken out, and we have a new prospect in the middle, or a new contender, I guess, in the middleweight division. But that wasn't the case. And it wasn't just like he got out-grappled by Jack Hermansson, because obviously everyone knows Jack Hermansson for being this great threatening submission grappler. He got beaten on the feet as well to Jack Hermansson. I mean, Jack Hermansson, don't get me wrong, he improved his game a lot for this fight, but a lot of people thought when he was on the feet, Joe Pyfer would put his lights out, and that wasn't the case. He showed that he can't really strike with guys like Jack Hermansson. So if he would have ended up facing a striker like Marvin Vettori or a higher ranked striker in the middleweight division, he would have got beaten even worse. So for Joe Pyfer, it showed us that his skill set isn't as good as we thought it was. It showed us that he doesn't deserve to be on a Fight Night main event, and he got shut down pretty quickly by Jack Hermansson. Wasn't a bad loss. He didn't get finished or anything like that, and he's still a dangerous striker as well. But because of the way that he lost and the fact that he lost to Hermansson and no one ranked really higher, I'm going to have to put Joe Pyfer in B tier for now. Fairly big fraud check in the UFC. Showed us that he's not one of these big hype trains. And I guess it was a hype train if it was a hype train, then it got derailed. Jonathan Martinez. I'm putting Jonathan Martinez in D tier. The dude lost to Jose Aldo, man. Like, come on. The dude lost to Jose Aldo. Again, similar to a couple of the other guys on this list, no one was looking at Jonathan Martinez as the future bantamweight champion. Don't get me wrong. He was on a big streak of wins. He had some great wins. Said Nurmagomedov, Cub Swanson, Adrian Yanez. Great kickboxer, and he still is a great kickboxer. I don't think the Aldo fight showed us that Jonathan Martinez is any worse than we thought. He just lost to one of the greatest of all time in Jose Aldo in a decision as well. So in Rio de Janeiro as well. So for Jonathan Martinez, I still think he could beat a lot of these guys ranked top 10 to top 15 area of the bantamweight division, and I still think he's got a bright future in this division. I don't think losing to Aldo is necessarily a bad loss. It wasn't like he lost to a bum, because now people think that Aldo can potentially make a run for the title. So for Jonathan Martinez, it wasn't a fraud check. I'm putting him in straight into D tier. And then finally on this list, quite possibly one of the biggest fraud checks in UFC history, Robelis Despaigne. Everyone was calling this guy the Cuban Francis Ngannou, a future title challenger, the future of the heavyweight division. Even he said himself that he thinks he's going to be a champion by 2025. There were people saying that we should start a campaign where every single week we feed every fat heavyweight to Robelis Despaigne and then slowly get rid of them in the UFC. And he gets given a fat heavyweight in his second fight in the UFC, and he gets absolutely beaten up by Waldo Acosta. A guy called Waldo absolutely beat the brakes off Robelis Despaigne. When this guy was supposed to be doing that to Waldo Acosta, he was supposed to be beating him up as well. And it wasn't just like he got, a close decision lost. He showed us that he's got no grappling. He showed us that his gas tank is horrible. And to be honest, he looked pretty bad out there as well. And it showed us that when the fight gets past 1 minute, Robelis Despaigne has nothing to offer. One of the biggest fraud checks in the UFC. Imagine the amount of parlays this guy's ruined. The amount of people that bet on Robelis Despaigne to win by first round KO and to go out there against Waldo Cortez Acosta and get beaten in the way that you did, and show us that not only you're not ready for the rankings, but there might be a lot of unranked fat heavyweights out there that beat you. The amount of comparisons, the amount of narratives got completely shut down after that fight. So Robelis Despaigne, shame on you, mate. One of the biggest fraud checks in UFC history. But that is my list of some of the biggest fraud checks, especially this year. Let me know if I should have included any fighters or if you disagree with any of the placements that I've made, but I think this is a solid list for some big fraud checks. So let me know your thoughts on this list, and thank you for watching.